Hi, welcome everyone. So this is the first of our video blog series for the Influencers Network, and I'm very pleased to welcome Karen Poole, who is the consultant therapist in rehabilitation at East Sussex Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust. Now, Karen did the first blog, which was about becoming the face of rehabilitation as she embarks on the journey of transforming rehabilitation. And so this vlog is more about tips and ideas for how you can join in Karen's journey yourself and get inspiration. So I'm just going to ask the first question. So Karen, what first gave you the confidence to influence change and transformation?
So, hi Mindy, and thank you for inviting me to share some of my journey with you. So I guess in terms of that question, I think it's about being that clinical role and the clinical credible voice. I think that's probably the first step that allowed me on my journey in terms of transformation. I think within the organisation where I work, there was a real gap in that senior rehabilitation leadership. We didn't have a rehabilitation medical consultant body present within the organisation, and therefore that guidance and expertise was sought through, particularly through our AHP leads. I was also fortunate, I think, as well, that there were quite a number of influential organisational leads who brought me into their conversations at that time, thinking particularly around the trauma agenda that came around in 2012. One of the anaesthetic colleagues that I worked with was really keen to bring that rehabilitation voice to the table. And I think that first gave me that kind of platform, I guess, if you like, Mindy, to be able to talk about rehabilitation and the importance in the longevity of a pathway. The other thing I feel is that AHPs are really good at offering a different lens to the routine conversations that may take place within organisations, particularly along sort of urgent care pathways, and offering that feedback to other senior colleagues around other types of information that's useful as they develop their plans. And then I guess probably the key pivotal point for me within my organisation was having that role as the head AHP, which gave me that opportunity to be at the executive table.
Brilliant, thanks, Karen. So what strategies do you think in your journey have you found most helpful in achieving your influencing goals?
Oh, that's quite a tough question, isn't it, Mindy, really? And I guess the first thing I would say is that you're going to use different tools for different parts of an agenda, for different groups, for different people, for different reasons, really. But there are a couple of things in terms of preparing for this vlog, really, was about authenticity. So being really honest about your agenda. So where is it that you're ultimately trying to get to? Even if you're not clear about how you're going to get there, and I'm really often not clear about how I'm going to get there, what I try to do is share my why. I think fundamentally during my journey as a senior clinician within rehabilitation, my why hasn't changed. You know, the national agendas may have changed, but my why hasn't. And I think this helps with colleagues understanding why you may take an approach that you want. I think it also helps our colleagues to make sure that you're consistent and support with unifying multiple different agendas, because often within one strategy, particularly for rehabilitation, we know that there are multiple different agendas which are trying to not move us off course, but often it can feel a bit like a weather vane, and we're being shifted around in the wind. And often in roles like mine, we're often the individual that's spanning all of those different competing agendas, and actually we could use that position to our best opportunity to find those common themes. I think the other kind of approaches that I think about is being flexible. So thinking about, you know, a multi-pronged approach. There's never one way to crack a nut, and we all know that. Thinking really about qualitative as well as quantitative methods. Data is absolutely key, but actually what's the sense and the feel about what's happening with your colleagues, with your patients, and just almost the temperature of the system, what's happening. It's really good to understand that problem, but actually it's definitely about listening and being curious. I think there's also something about the macro approaches that support the micro approaches that support that macro change. So listening to the small things, being really cognizant about the small changes that are happening, because often they amplify into those bigger changes. And also recognising that people will come to the party at different times. We all know that there's different reasons for people wanting to be involved in strategic change. And you just need to understand what's driving people and allow them to be part of that change at the time that suits them. The other thing that I try, and it has been really tricky over the last 18 months, is around visibility. So being visible and being approachable, whether that be virtually or otherwise. There's something about living with the team that you're working with to really get under the skin of that team and understand those micro changes that I mentioned earlier that are still really important in terms of influencing how your strategy takes place. And along with that, that visibility comes that approachability and accessibility, really making sure that not just yourself, but in terms of that strategic vision, lots of different ways for people to engage, different types of communication approaches. So I use things like forums, we use formalized meetings, we do lots of one-to-one and what I call corridor or coffee water cooler conversations. They're often the most successful. Workshops, bulletins, you know, there's never going to be one way, and do lots of it. I would say lots and lots of communication, making it work at all different levels for all different types of people in all different types of sectors. Everyone needs to feel that they've got that right to contribute to the direction of travel, and some of the most insightful changes that I've recognised have come from our support staff in that corridor conversation. There's also something about that person by person change, and I talked in the last blog about some of the work we did in intermediate care, and this was something I really felt as we started to do this, that person to person change, using storytelling as a way of relating to different groups and individuals. Everyone's why is different, so you've got to think about how you support winning hearts and minds, and that takes time, but it's really, really important investment, I feel. The other thing, and I talked at the very start of this, is about that clear mission. So it's about that consistency. So I often might know where my mission is, and I might try and describe that mission, but I might not know how I'm going to get there. In fact, I never do know how we're going to get there, because that's actually how we collaborate together to get there. But when you've got that mission, it's thinking about the elevator pitch you need for multiple groups. So when you're involved in strategic change, you're going to be talking to lots of different people, and everybody will have a different reason as to why what you're doing is important for them. So it's about making sure that you can moderate that elevator pitch to get them engaged, but making sure that you're consistent with the theme, even if that messaging shifts over time.
Great, thank you. And turning to the new iCSP system, what do you think are the opportunities for physios looking towards this new system as we approach it and talk about change and transformation?
I think it's a really exciting time, Mindy. I really do. And I think certainly my experience of the system where we work in Sussex, it feels like it's a really collaborative opportunity. And there's definitely a real feel of bringing AHPs into that strategic voice across the iCSP in a number of different roles. So there should be lots of unfolding work streams that are happening across the different programs of work within the iCSP. And it's a really great place to hear and share that physio voice or the wider AHP voice. So my advice would be find out who's in your system. Is there a rehab lead on any of the work streams? And often what's happening with the work streams is that they will have clinical leads relating to that program of work. Some of those may be AHPs or physiotherapists. Find out who they are. If so, get in touch with them, offer up your skills, your ability to engage, find out what they need. You know, I'm in a couple of those roles, and I absolutely love hearing from people across our system who want to connect and want to share with me their experience, the work that they've done. And actually, you know, as clinical leads, we're in a position of almost a lack of knowledge across a wider system. We might understand our own microclimate, if you like. So it's absolutely brilliant to hear from people who are doing stuff, they know what works, they want to amplify it. And so actually, I would say that those clinical leads who are in those positions within the iCSP will be waiting to hear from you, so do get in touch. I also think that the AHP voice in the iCSP does depend on the architecture of your integrated care system. So for example, who is the Programme Director for Long-Term Conditions? Where I am, I'm fortunate that it happens to be a physiotherapist by background. So I think that individual takes a different lens to who they include within their clinical leadership groups within the integrated care system. But I know for others that there is a challenge when maybe it's not an AHP voice. So sometimes there is a risk that voice can get lost. But there's absolutely a number of programs across the whole of the integrated care system architecture, such as population health, personalised care, urgent care streams, community care streams, responsive community streams, where we can all get involved, particularly as physiotherapists. I think we've got so much to offer and so much insight. So, you know, proactive integrated care systems are looking for those roles, and some of those integrated care systems are still only at the point of really forming their structures. So look out for those roles. And what I would say to people is actually take a punt, get involved, even if it's something that you've not done before.
And that leads me very nicely on to my next question. So hopefully many CSP members watching this and who've read your blog previously will be inspired. And so what would you say to those CSP members who really want to influence change and are thinking of ways of doing it, but they just don't know where to start?
Do you know what, Mindy? I would just say, just get involved. Just find that first step in the door. You know, there are a number of different networks. So dependent on your, you know, your clinical speciality or the particular pathways that you work in, there will already be a number of networks. And again, networks are crying out for engagement. They really thrive on engagement. So, you know, have a look around, look onto, you know, your local ICS websites or your CCG websites, or even your specialist interest groups will be able to connect you with networks within your area. There are regional groups. Again, they may be speciality-led, they may be disciplinary-led, they may be area-led. Get involved, find out what they're talking about, or the forums or emerging work streams, as I've already talked about. You know, start by, you know, getting involved in small local team change. You know, what are you doing? Offer to do a small test of change in your local area. What do you see? How does this have an impact beyond your team? Because then that gives you that information to start to share up the stream a little bit and say, actually, we've tried this. Because again, you know, coming back to my comment I made earlier, I'm really keen to hear from people who've done that change. You know, sitting in a clinical leadership role within the integrated care system, I don't have the answer. The answer's out there, and I need to hear what the answers might be or what the solutions might be. The other thing I would say is be curious. What do you see as the opportunities? Speak to your professional leads within your organisation who, you know, they may well be aware of what the other opportunities are, particularly coming down through HEI, so the universities. Talk to your QI or strategy team within your organisation and say, you know, what's on offer to me? I'd really like to get involved in shaping strategy. So I know a number of organisations will often put out for a collective, almost a crowdfunding type approach really to their strategy. I know our organisation has done that. So what do they see, or what do we feel is important for our strategy? And again, you know, the AHP crowdfunding agenda, you know, what's out there, get involved in that, shape it, you know, make your voice heard. Also be aware of changing agendas that are important and influential in your clinical area. So engaging in things like the Future NHS platform, that's a really great place to start. iCSP, keeping an eye on things like the big think tanks, so Health Foundation, King's Fund, quality innovation areas. You know, what are the webinars that are happening? There's often a call for input and guidance to shape some of those policies that come out. Again, that might be your first start. And then finally, I think probably for me, being sort of slightly more strategic about it, I would say think about who your mentors are. So if you've not got a mentor, try and get yourself a mentor. And also think about who's out there in your system, who might be a useful mentor to have, both for you as an individual, but also for you to share some of your thoughts and your thinking. You know, so identify those who perhaps are already doing strategic change, and that might help you with your first step.
That's fabulous, Karen. I think that's hopefully given members loads of ideas and loads of channels to sort of get started with. Since we collaborated on that first blog on the work that you're doing and the journey that you've started, is there any sort of updates now that we're a couple of months on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, it's always ever busy, Mindy, and strategy work. Sometimes it's those things, they creep up on you and you think, oh, crikey, we've made some significant change. So I think the last time we met, I talked about some of the restoration work that we were doing in East Sussex through and following some of the waves of the pandemic. What did we see as different? And we had 13 projects that we implemented, and now all of those are business as usual. So what we're doing now is we're starting to shape and describe what we're considering our phase 3. So we had phase 1, which was intermediate care, phase 2, which was around restoration and recovery in a post-COVID pandemic. And then phase 3 is around our community sustainability. We know that the pandemic has completely changed the structure and the kind of the approach that our community services need to take. We're seeing far greater complexity. We've got D2A, Home First, Pathway 3. So much is happening for our community teams. So where we're starting with, in fact, I just came off of a call with my project officer. We're setting up a session for, I think it's next week actually, with some of our community leads. And it's just around that first starting conversation around hearing, understanding and describing what it feels like at the moment. And so how we might begin to take some of those first steps. And what I would say, Mindy, is that it takes time to move teams towards that precipice of change. And that's where we are at the moment. We're kind of shifting everybody forward together. And that's not just me shifting, that's all of us shifting together. We're collaborating, we're working together, we're trying to we keep iterating and talking about where we are. So getting closer, almost in that kind of hermeneutic spiral, if you like, coming to that point of collaborative understanding about where we are. And we're doing that in a number of different ways. And some of those things I've already talked about this morning. So lots of small group conversations. It's really great to have, that time to talk. And I appreciate that at the moment, not everybody has that, but actually that investment of time is really important, both for the individuals, but also for the richness of what you get out of that. We're supporting our recovery, restoration and rehabilitation forum that I talked about in terms of the wider strategic agenda. So making sure we're bringing the right skills into that agenda to make sure that people feel that they've got the right tools as they start to think about change. We're talking about, how we look at the wicked problem, if you like, and whatever that wicked problem might be. So really having time to map that out. And so at the moment, we're not planning for the solutions at the sessions that we're describing, but just that shared narrative of where we are. And I just really feel we need to allow that to land and for the teams to collectively see where the next step may lie. And I think hopefully through my previous blog and this one, I don't have the answers, that's not what this is about. This is about being that supportive and critical friend at times to help people to describe what they feel are the right solutions for their service and for their patients. And then sort of alongside this, we're also doing, developing behind the scenes a bit of a supportive transformation platform for all of our community staff, where we'll provide some of that specific education and the sharing sessions. So thinking about how we bring in our personalised care teams, the rehab data, peer leadership, how we look at impacts of long-term disability and accessibility models, as well as those transformation skills and bespoke project development. And again, really want to stress, this is not me, this is co-developed and designed with our professional leadership, our health and wellbeing, and our learning and development teams. So it's quite busy. It feels really busy, and I think we're in that phase of bringing everybody together. And I just want to say that some of this does take time, and it's worth investing some of that time before you jump to some solutions.
Thank you, Karen, for giving us that insight, because I think that's really valuable for our members to actually find out what's actually going on behind the scenes and some of the things that you're starting to do, as you say, to sort of collaborate. And it's going back to that winning hearts and minds. So I just really appreciate your time and look forward to hearing more from you as your journey continues. So thanks, Karen.
Great. Thanks, Mindy.